I converted a RV that my mom and I worked on all summer. It was a cozy little space with everything I needed: a bed, a stove, and even a small fridge. With my RV ready, I quit my job and lived my dream of traveling from city to city, seeing new places and meeting new people. After 6 months on the road, I became adept at finding the perfect spots to park up for the night. Most of the time, I wasn't bothered by anyone and always moved spots every night to avoid detection or annoying the residents. My RV was a stealth RV, so to the naked eye, it looked like a normal RV. However, inside, it was decked out with everything I needed to live life on the road. One night, I found myself on a quiet street surrounded by skyscrapers, and I knew I had found the perfect spot for the night. I decided to stay an extra couple of nights since I hadn't had any issues there and was running out of spots in the city. On the last night, around 2 a.m., I heard a knock on the RV. Initially, I thought it might be security or someone trying to move me on. When I looked out of the window, I saw 2 women, both in their mid-40s and dressed in business attire. My heart started racing as I realized this could be something more serious than a friendly chat. The taller woman spoke first, her voice low and urgent. She said they needed to talk, and it was important. I hesitated before opening the side window, wondering what they could want at this time of night. The woman explained that they were in trouble and needed my help. They needed me to take them to a nearby city, and they would pay me for my trouble. My gut told me that something wasn't right. The only problem was my driver's side door, which never locked. The woman opened the door and told me they needed to go quickly. By this point, I felt like if I just drove them to where they needed to go, they would leave me alone. As we were driving, I noticed that they were both on edge, constantly looking out of the windows and checking their phonies. I started to feel uneasy, but I didn't want to upset them. After a while, they told me to pull over on a deserted highway. I started to panic, but I didn't know what to do. One of the women got out of the RV and opened the back doors, rummaging through my belongings. My heart was racing as I tried to think of a way out of this situation. I knew I had to stay calm. Suddenly, I heard a truck approaching. I felt relieved, thinking it might be someone who could help me. I pressed down on the horn, flashed my lights at the other driver, and took my keys before jumping out of the RV. The 2 women panicked and ran off into the city. The other driver asked me what had happened, and I explained everything. I called the police, and when they arrived, they searched the city but couldn't find them. They told me they were investigating a string of fraud cases in the area and believed these women were responsible. I was shaken by the experience, but grateful it hadn't turned out worse. It taught me a valuable lesson about the importance of being aware of my surroundings and staying vigilant at all times. After that night, I took extra precautions when parking up for the night, fixing the door lock, locking all doors and windows, and always keeping my phone nearby. It was a scary experience, but it made me more cautious on the road. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and become a member of the family. Also, don't forget to share and like with your family and friends. If you have a horror story or other terrifying experience, you can submit it. Make sure to activate the bell button to receive all new updates. We love you very much and hope you have fewer nightmares. I never thought I'd be the type of person to live in a van, but after my girlfriend Olivia and I both lost our jobs last year, we decided to take a chance on the van life. We bought an old Ford and spent 7 months converting it into a sleeper. It was hard work, but we loved it. We felt like we were building our own home. I had done all of the woodworking framing after watching countless YouTube videos on van building, and Olivia added the finishing touches such as bedding, decorations, and pillows. According to her, the result was me doing 50% of the build, and she made it a house and a home. Now, 6 months later, we were still on the road, having traveled all over the country, staying in campsites in the summer and stealth camping in the city when they were closed. We thought we had gotten pretty good at finding quiet spots to park for the night, using an app that showed safe locations added by other van lifers. However, one night, we weren't so lucky. We couldn't find anywhere near on the app, so we parked in a quiet residential street and hoped for the best. As we were settling in for the night, we heard a noise outside. Initially, we thought it was just someone walking past, but then we heard the sound of metal scraping against metal. Someone was trying to break into our van. I immediately jumped up and checked our phone with cameras installed on all angles of the van. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear voices outside. Olivia was already dialing emergency services. We both knew we were in trouble. I tried to stay calm, knowing they didn't know anyone was inside the van. I had a baseball bat within reach but didn't want to use it unless absolutely necessary. The voices outside were getting louder, and they were trying to pry open one of the doors. I could see the metal bending under their force. I knew we had to do something fast. Olivia was on the phone with emergency services, but they were taking too long to arrive. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I carefully opened the door on the opposite side of the van and crawled out onto the ground. As soon as I stood up, I saw them. 3 men, all wearing dark hoodies and gloves. They looked surprised to see me. One of them held a crowbar in his hand. I tried to stay calm and collected but was terrified. I held up my hands to show I wasn't a threat and asked, "What do you want?" The man with the crowbar stepped forward and asked if it was my van. I knew we were in trouble. I looked around, trying to think of a way out, but the street was empty and quiet. The man with the crowbar took a step closer, saying, "Give us the keys." I hesitated, not wanting to give them the keys, but also not wanting to risk getting hurt. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys. As soon as I did, the man dropped them, and they all turned and ran. Something amazing happened. Red flashing lights and the sounds of police sirens were getting closer. We were standing by the side of the van as the police approached, catching our breath and trying to process what had just happened. We were both shaking with adrenaline and fear. When the police arrived, we gave them a description of the men and what had happened. They took our statements and promised to look into it. We felt a bit safer knowing that they were on the case. The next morning, we packed up and left the area. We didn't feel safe staying there anymore. We talked about what had happened and decided that we needed to be more careful when parking for the night. We also agreed that we needed to have a plan in case something like this happened again. It took us a few days to shake off the fear and paranoia, but eventually, we started to feel more like ourselves again. We continued our journey, but we were more cautious and aware of our surroundings. Looking back on that night, I realized how lucky we were. It could have been so much worse, but we were able to defend ourselves and protect our home. In the end, that's all that mattered. I was in college at the time, and during the summers when I would come home, I had a group of high school friends that I would hang out with. There were about 8 of us in the friend group, and we did all kinds of things together. In fact, we still hang out to this day. Anyway, when we all got home from school for the summer one year, we decided to take a camping trip together. We all brought tents, ingredients to make s'mores, and lots of drinks. We traveled there in 2 RVs to the campsite, which was about 3 hours away. When we got there, we set up our site and started hanging out by the lakey. We had a bonfire going, and most of us were talking, drinking, and having a good time. We were going late at night, and in the vicinity, we didn't see any other people at all. That's why, when we had to urinate, we would run into the woods a short distance and go next to a tree. At some point, I had to go and get out of my chair around the fire and make my way into the woods. There was a small path to walk down, and it was surprising how dark it was in the distance from the fire after looking at it for so long. It took my eyes some time to adjust as I entered the forest. I got maybe 20 feet or so when I heard someone else was there too. I thought it was one of my friends, so I went deeper into the forest so we could have more privacy. I made my way maybe 50 feet or so down the path and then went next to a tree. When I was done, I returned to the little road and walked back. I began to hear more voices as I did. The noise was coming from the woods off the trail and to the left side. I didn't really think it was one of my friends because I didn't know why they would go that far. I thought it might be an animal and feared it was a bear. I regained my walking speed when suddenly I heard a very loud sound of a tree branch breaking. Then I saw a huge chunk of tree fall directly behind me onto the road, about 5 feet away. I was lucky I hurried, or I might have crushed her. And when I say that tree branch was big, it was huge. I didn't know anyone or anything who could break a piece of a tree like that. It wasn't rainy or windy either, so I wasn't sure how that would happen. I was terrified, and then heard more loud noises in the forest, as if something was going on. I looked back at the forest where the noise was. For a brief second, I saw a huge dark shape dart between the trees and then disappear into the depths of the forest, moving so fast and strangely that I had never seen it before. At that moment, I turned and quickly ran back to the fire. When I came back, my friends saw that I was in shock. They looked and asked me what was wrong. I told them they would never believe me, but I did my best to explain. Some of my friends mentioned how they heard the sound of a tree breaking in the forest. I wondered what exactly it was. It made me feel a little better. But apart from that, I was pretty upset the rest of the night. If I hadn't been with such a large group of friends, I wouldn't have slept at all that night. Fortunately, after that, the rest of the camping trip was fine, but I will never forget everything I saw in the woods.